One of the ideas, Nithin, people talk about in the context of consciousness studies is the importance of silence, particularly the importance of inner silence.
Yes, yes.
And I'm remembering the inner silence because of the sweet melodies of the birds and the cuckoos just behind us.
Yes.
And often people say that, at least who are familiar with deep psychology and philosophies, that unlike other complex phenomenon which is open to more epistemological maneuvering, the more you try to process consciousness as an epistemic concept or an idea, it moves away from you, which means it's not that knowledge can finally give you an answer to what is consciousness. We were talking about structures of knowledge. So that's why that inner silence is important. And then when we talk about inner silence, what gives us that inner silence? Or the person whom you talk about as experiencing inner silence, what is he or what is she? Because finally there is an attempt for us to rediscover or recapture an identity which we perhaps have still not completely defined for ourselves. You need to actualize yourself in very many different ways. And that is why I think the whole larger goal of philosophy is actually fulfilled through consciousness studies, because self-inquiry gets its maximum attention in by understanding consciousness or by exploring consciousness. So I'm fascinated by this idea of inner silence. For example, I don't know, you have heard of Ramana Maharshi of Tiruvannamalai.
Yes.
He asked this question whenever someone comes with a very complex, very intellectually, very sophisticated, very intimidating issue. He would just straight away say, Nanar, ask that question. Who are you or who am I? So the ability to deeply reflect, who am
self-reflect,
itself gives you newer structures. Even epistemologically, but then which also has some deep connection to your own self. So that is why I would think, knowledge itself, when it comes to consciousness studies, has to be understood very differently. What is finally a knowledge piece about consciousness? Is it like any other knowledge? Knowledge about the sapota tree here, or the knowledge about the coconut tree there, or the building there? Is it something completely away from us? How does that knowledge influence us to be part or rediscover our own identity within the frame of consciousness? So what I wanted to argue is that in our discussions on consciousness, we are actually discussing about our own deeper spaces about self, because you cannot have a discussion on consciousness without a discussion on the self. So how is there a scope for understanding something which is very subjective in mathematics or in information theory, according to you?
Yes. So I think, so you mentioned about the role of silence and self-reflection. So I'm reminded of a quote from my advisor, and he would say that mathematics, music and meditation, these three are central for any endeavor.
That's very interesting.
So the three M's,
Then we have to talk about that very soon.
Okay, Sangeetha, so you talked about the importance of silence and self-reflection in consciousness studies, understanding consciousness, and also the question of whether mathematics has a role to play in this regard.
That's right.
I think my understanding of mathematics is it somewhat mimics this idea of self-inquiry. That a mathematical approach would be that given any situation, any phenomena, you try to reflect back upon the assumptions which underlie that phenomenon. That is something like self-reflection, right? You are going backwards. You're not trying to answer the question directly, but you're trying to ask what is the framework under which this question can arise, this phenomenon can be understood. So there is that link, I would say, and practically, I feel that mathematical thinking can be applied for self-inquiry in that sense. The question as to whom is this happening?
Okay.
That is more of a going backwards, going to the underlying assumptions. We make certain assumptions about the way we are, the person, the world around us,
Correct.
the relationships.
Correct.
So these are actually put in focus, and I think it's a mathematical activity in my experience.
Your
So
experience.
that would be the connection.
One of the critiques in science is that, or in scientific approaches, as you know, is that since consciousness holds
Yes.
a very subjective quality about it,
Right.
how can you quantify it? And
Right.
without quantifying, how do you understand something? For
Right,
example,
right.
the whole project of understanding,
Yes.
knowledge making, is difficult when it comes to qualities. And of course, we know that humanities, social sciences, arts have always, considered qualities
Yes.
as a very important aspect
That's right.
in knowledge production. But when it comes to science, and particularly understanding consciousness,
Yes.
the subject seems to be the larger puzzle. So as you know, the
Right.
Chalmersian heart problem, right?
Correct.
How does the binding of very quantitative, discrete, physical components give rise to something which is very subjective, very qualitative,
yes,
and
yes.
unitary?
Exactly.
So
Yep.
how can the discrete give
Correct,
rise to
give rise to-
unitary?
right.
It's a billion-dollar question.
Yes.
But then we can also ask whether this is the right question. Is it something which is happening in that direction,
Yes.
or is it something which is unitary, perhaps giving rise to something which is discrete? Because we have only looked at
correct.
discrete components giving rise
Yes.
to unitary. But how about the other way?
Other way
you
around.
know, the larger perspective, and then looking at the components. Why I wanted to raise is that it's very interesting that in consciousness studies, many of our usual ways of structure making, particular hypothesis doesn't hold good.
That's right. Yeah.
Because it doesn't hold a good standing when
Right.
it comes to comprehending something which is so deep and
Yes.
personal, such as consciousness.
Correct.
So I would think that the struggle in consciousness studies,
Yeah.
which is faced by particularly biologists, is because of the presence of the self, and the more you try to reduce the self into a biological function or a process,
Correct. Yeah.
you don't have much to further look at, or
Right.
you will end up perhaps looking at more mechanisms
Right.
or more physiological functions. There is nothing,
That's right,
no
yeah.
mystery left out.
Right.
But then are you saying that there is no mystery about consciousness? Well, that's again a very important question.